when you walk into an intensive care unit, when you're leading a team, you feel all the eyes are on you. We're doing things that are high risk. We've made a call.
You suddenly feel like you're a failure. You've let everyone down. Every surgeon walks around with a graveyard. What's your relationship like with failure?
Well, no one likes to fail. It's so painful.
You questioned your very choices.
Why did I become a surgeon? Why did I become a doctor? Why was I even born?
You forget about the other thousands of lives that you made a difference.
You do start getting dark thoughts. I couldn't eat. I was sleeping about 3 hours. I got so depressed. I had to ask myself, was I safe to work? In medicine, we focus on the disasters. And what we don't do enough of is learn from near misses. The closest crocodile to the boat is actually you. You have to be brutally honest with yourself. You have to ask for help.
And what did you do to get out of it to be where you are today? Welcome everyone to Thrive with Ram. And today I have Professor Tan Arulampalam, who I affectionately know as Tan, joining us. He has an illustrious background and career. And I'll leave it to Tan to really introduce himself. Tan, welcome on the show.
Hi, Ram. This is really fantastic to be with you. As always, you are the innovator. And this series, I think, is really, really going to be exciting. I start with, I'm a human being. I would normally say I was a surgeon. So listen, I'm colorectal general surgeon. I was born in Sri Lanka. My parents came to England in the 60s. I came in 1974 on a holiday, which I think probably defined me. And so I did my medical training, got into colorectal surgery, and I've got a real passion for teaching and training, because I think actually that's our little gift that we all have. Everyone has it in them to do some sort of teaching and training. So I've tried to build my life, incorporate, it's just that crazy juggle, trying to incorporate doing surgery, being a decent doctor, having a family, and as you say, trying to thrive, not just survive.
And I know right now on the international stage, you're working with Johnson & Johnson as an academic education lead. Can you just tell me a bit about that? Yeah,
so my life is really, I spent 30 years working for the NHS. And I spent a lot of time doing my clinical work, so the practice of medicine. But I now do quite a lot of consulting, and I also do quite a bit of education. And Johnson & Johnson is just one of the companies I work with. I work with Advanced Medical Solutions, CMR, robotics. So it's a way, it's quite difficult at the moment getting the educational pearls across, primarily because the people who you're training, the learners, need to have access, and sometimes this needs to be supported and sponsored. And if that's industry, we have to work in partnership with industry and not have that friction. So I do quite a bit with J&J in the Middle East. I do the Future Leaders course in the UK and in Europe. And this is all about not just the technical aspects of surgery, which of course I do all the colorectal courses, but also some of the non-technical issues, and how we've got to think about 2030, 2040. What are we going to do to prepare our surgeons, our colleagues, and ourselves for delivering high quality medical care? What's that going to look like? So the J&J partnership, that the work I do is really great. I work with some fantastic people. Their core ethos is actually about patient outcomes. You'd think they want to get the bottom line done, but the Prof Ed team, the teams across EMEA, across the globe are fabulous.
And probably our audience wouldn't know, but I trained under you, Tan. I was your senior house officer, and you were a pretty stern boss, I would say. And I've learned a lot from you, and I've always seen you as a mentor. And one of the things I've always admired, and what I'm trying to replicate, is how you juggled so many different things, also being a family man. So What did you have to sacrifice?
Well, I do spend too much time on Instagram, and I got one of these memes come through of a surgeon in their gowns and said, "This is the most expensive clothes I wear. I sacrificed my family, my mental health, my time, my physical ability." It overhypes the thing. The reality of a career in medicine, it doesn't matter where you are, we all sacrifice stuff. It's not just me, it's you, it's everyone. And I think that's the profession. That's what we decided to do at the age of 18. So the sacrifice is really yourself. But don't forget, we get a great drug. We work with people, and that appreciation from people is worth $1 million. The love you get, the thanks you get, and that sense of being needed, which, as we come to the end of our careers, it's really interesting to see how senior clinicians deal with retirement, because suddenly you may be the top person, but you slightly become irrelevant. So, to answer your question, you sacrifice family. Family always takes number 2 place. And whatever you say, if you speak to my amazing, lovely wife, she will say, for periods I was a single mother, and with 5 children, that's quite hard work. I think I probably sacrificed myself in terms of what I did physically, looking after myself. So I did go through a large part of my career just surviving. I didn't do the physical exercise that I needed to do. I didn't really look after myself. And boy, did I feel it until I got that wake-up call, which again comes from those that are close to you, those that love you. My wife kept badgering me, and being a stubborn person, I only really took the message over the last 10 years, and it's been a slow process.
I'm here right now because my wife's being a single mother at home right now, and you're right, there is a degree of sacrifice. How did you take your family on the journey with you? Especially, you mentioned your wonderful wife and your children. Is this a journey that you all agreed to do together?
Well, they just got embedded in life, and we just made it work. I made a conscious decision not to work in London, in the metropolis. I think I would have really liked that sort of job. But I went to a place that was dynamic. I had great support, fantastic colleagues, and it was in the country. So, what did we want when we were looking to set up our career and life? I spoke to Katie, my wife, and we said we need somewhere that's at the cutting edge. So in the early 2000s, in my field, laparoscopy, minimally invasive surgery, was the cutting edge. Mm-hmm. We wanted somewhere close to the sea and somewhere close to London, so because there was life in London. And I think that mix was great. I think we surrounded ourselves with amazing people. When life hits rock bottom, you need a good crew. And I think the one thing I will say is we have amazing local medical friends and local non-medical friends who will run through walls for you. So that was the sort of set. And then how did we work life? Well, we worked life by making sure, there would be times when I would do the school run infrequently, but once or twice a week I could do a run, or I would do a crazy pickup in the evening, but I consciously juggled. So my Monday evening clinic, private clinic, after all day operating, that was born out of my wife taking my number 2 daughter to gymnastics in Colchester. She would drop her there. There was no point her waiting because she had the other kids. I would finish my list, and then I had this sort of dead time. So I thought I'll do a clinic and then I'll pick her up from gymnastics. So we did lots of little hacks like that to make life work.
I think everyone probably can share the same story. And I want to go back also to you as a surgeon and as a human healer. I remember, right now, we're all caught up with technology. There's AI, there's robotics, there's automation in healthcare. But I remember once when I was your senior house officer, you had a very polite but very stern word with me because I forgot to measure the fluid input and output of a patient. Now, maybe I was lazy, maybe I forgot, but it was a very stern word. And it's one of those things that sort of defined the way I related to my patients. To me, sticking to the basics and the fundamentals are still very, very important in being a good surgeon and a good doctor. Could you elaborate on why we cannot forget our basics and the fundamentals, not only in healthcare, but also outside healthcare?
I think a good rule for life, Tom Hanks talks about this. Turn up on time, know the script, have an idea. So turn up on time, he describes, usually turning up on time is about being early. Mm-hmm. Know the script, have some situational awareness, know the basics, okay? Because life isn't, if you want to complicate life, you can. But actually knowing the basics is in every field, that's what you need to know. And then have an idea is just contribute, show that little micro leadership. So I think that's really, really important. And going back to, high reliability organizations delivering good healthcare, we know that 10-20% of adverse events in hospitals and patient harm are due to safety issues related to human factors, communication, etc. So sticking to the script, doing the basics, and actually speaking that common language is important. In surgery, 2% of patients have a complication. 14 out of every 100 patients have a healthcare associated infection. We have 5.7 to 8.4 million people dying a year from adverse events. And about 20 to 40% of our healthcare spend in a hospital is due to adverse events and harm. So that's about getting the fluids in and out right. That's about documentation, clear documentation, putting your name legibly. I think doing the basics is really important. And when you do the basics for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years, boy, do you learn so much. And that's where you can actually innovate, because then you see where the problems are.
So now I'm going to go back a bit into the past, Tan. I came to the UK 2003, bright-eyed, and all I can say is the UK has been very, very kind to me. But they always say, no two children in the family see the same parents. You said that you came to the UK on a holiday in 1974. What was it like? And because I'm sure your experiences were different from mine, but how did coming in 1974 shape the person you are, growing up in a country that is now very multicultural and inclusive? Of course, we still have things that we have to work through. But could you just talk me through what it was like?
I made the comment about the holiday because that's really framed my attitude going forward. Okay. Although I'm a very serious person and very meticulous and, sadly a perfectionist, I am relatively relaxed. I don't get too bothered about the minutiae. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a reasonable attitude to have. England in the mid-70s, so I have to say, this is brilliant. This is my country, and I think there were challenges, but we were surrounded by warmth and great people. Life was quite tough going to school in Wembley in the mid-1970s. There was a lot of name calling and bullying, but what I learnt, your question was, how did that shape you? You've got to become a warrior. Mm-hmm. If you want to lie down and let people walk over you, that's fine. It's not fine, but in my view, you have to state who you are, talk to people. Usually when you come across adversity, it's usually due to a lack of education. And, I learnt a lot. I thought my family would go back to Sri Lanka, but the war, which was, it was a terrible hidden war with such brutalization and loss of life. If that war was happening now, perhaps social media might have amplified some of the messages. But for us personally, it was very sad because we couldn't build the life that certainly my parents wanted to build. this has been amazing. Never waste a crisis. So for us as a family, we built a different life. And the UK, England was great. My schooling was fantastic. And I realized that as a brown boy, you had to do things slightly differently. But you know what? You shouldn't dwell too much on that. I think the important thing is if you show your personality, you tend to find your tribe.
And do you think your parents feel that you built the life that they wanted to build in the UK?
Listen, life is about evolution. And you can have these amazing plans, but actually life is constantly changing. We've gone from living in caves to living in small dwellings and gathering, people of about 100, 150 in a village, to huge megacities. We've had technology from the printing press to books, to electricity, and now to the information age, which has so many different threads. Of course, human beings are going to change. And it's the human-machine interface that you alluded to earlier on that's important. And that has societal impacts, that has psychological impacts, and that, we can see that's having physical impacts as well. And the way we work, the jobs we do, what we find important will change.
You've been someone who's actually had to adapt very early on in life, from leaving a country that was war-torn, having to find a new life here. And then, of course, surgery is ever evolving. I remember when people were doing surgeons were doing open surgery, then there was the shift towards laparoscopic surgery, now it's to robotics. And now we've got the advent of AI, and training is different. How important is adaptability in terms of that shaped you?
I wouldn't over-egg it. We as medics are glacially slow.
Do you think so?
So, you look at any medical innovation from the point of proof to becoming mainstream is about 20 years. You look at EVAR, you look at all the technologies, even laparoscopy. In 2005, the penetration of laparoscopy was about 5%. It's probably about 80%. But you go to some countries in Eastern Europe, it's zero. You go to Malaysia, I've had a request from the Malaysian Society to help them. The penetration is low. So in medicine, innovation does take time to get to the bedside. And there are various issues. There's the innovator's laggard curve, that you can see that there are regulatory issues that slow things down. There are personality issues. There are financial constraints. So although I'd like to say I was on this innovator's curve, if you look societally, medicine and surgery in particular has been fairly slow. We're on an uptick now, but we have to be realistic about the technology out there. So take computer vision, will we have autonomous surgery? Computer vision, for what it's needed, particularly in soft tissue surgery, will need a little bit more time. It's not going to be 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, it'll happen, but it'll be a little bit slower, and that gives us time to adapt. And I think your question was about adaptability. I mean, that's just a primal evolutionary necessity. If you adapt and have a growth mindset and have some situation awareness about what's happening around you, then actually you will make some intelligent decisions.
And of course, innovation also means failure along the way. Because even if you look at some of the advances in rocket science, you're seeing rockets explode, and even in healthcare. What's your relationship like with failure? Because I've always seen there's a difference in how people relate to failure. And those who look at it differently seem to do a lot better than those who look at it in another way. What's your relationship like with failure?
Well, no one likes to fail.
Yeah.
The truth is, our DNA for billions of years as a species is about failure. We happen to be the ones that have survived and changed. I'm naturally a perfectionist. And failure is quite interesting. My approach to failure is to try and embrace and learn from it. So it's really interesting. I don't know whether you've read Amy Edmondson's book, The Right Kind of Wrong. where she talks about intelligent failure and, not setting your alarm and failing to get up in the morning is just bad.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a chef at Nobu and you've got 10 different dishes that you're creating, one might be the star dish. So you accept that 9 are not going to work. So that's intelligent failure, learning from what was wrong with those 9. In medicine, it's quite hard because it's critical and there are people on the ends of your decisions. So that failure is really important, and it's very rich, but B, you owe it to our patients. I've always tried to learn. I've always tried to audit what happens. Heinrich did some work on high reliability, safety critical organizations, oil and gas industry, and the ratio of catastrophic disaster, Blue Water Horizon, to significant incidents to small near misses is 1 to 30 to 300. Mm-hmm. And what we do is in medicine, we focus on the disasters. Mm-hmm. And what we don't do enough of is learn from near misses. Yeah. And I think in my life, I've always think there, but for the grace of God, I've always taken note of what's happened around me and also my near misses and our team's near misses. I have no fear of talking about failure. And, I've plumbed the depths. I've sat almost like we're sitting now when I was doing my last assessment before becoming a consultant in my training. And very wise surgeon, he just said, it was almost a fireside chat, but, he said, you'll have some really dark days. Mm. Now, I'd never sort of set myself up to prepare for those dark days, but it was a really interesting, insightful piece of advice. And I think what we have to realize is we will be met with challenges all the time. And you've got to adopt the warrior mentality. Is it fight, flight, or fawn? Mm-hmm. And, I think you have to take an attitude. If you're made a mistake, witnessed a mistake, been part of something, A, you have to stand up and acknowledge it, and B, you have to really learn from it. Roger Federer has he gives a speech to some university kids. I'm sure everyone has seen it on social media. He talks, this is one of the greatest champions, and not only is a great champion, he's a lovely guy, and he's entertained all of us. Yeah. And he talks, I think he only won about 80% of his matches. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, he says, of those 80%, how many points do you think he won in those matches? He only won 54% of the points.
Oh, okay.
But the thing that he did was he won enough points to win the games and enough games to win the matches. And the point about that is don't dwell on the failure. It happens, learn from it, put it away, and then look forward. So I've not because of Federer, but I've naturally had that. So that's the theory. Mm-hmm. What's the practice? What's the real me? So if you ask my wife, she'll tell you if I have an anastomotic leak, I'm the most miserable person.
I can imagine.
I'm grumpy.
I think I've seen you get miserable when I was a trainee.
Yeah, you have absolutely the version of me that I would never want anyone to see, but that's the reality is you have to go through that. Having said that, I've done it so often now, I acknowledge it and I realize it. Recently I had a surgical complication, and I went through that whole thing of why did I become a surgeon? Why did I become a doctor? Why was I even born? Because that's how painful. So this is the reality, the lived experiences. It's so painful. Yeah. And facing up to your failure is humbling. It makes you feel foolish sometimes. But you have to do it. That's how you grow. And I think in medicine, it happens much more than we would like to admit. So how do you survive that? Because, most people don't die by the bullet in the heart. They die because of the stress of the bullets every day. Somebody or something is trying to make me fail every day. Yeah. And I can help in that process as well. So I think it's about being able to acknowledge those things, being strong and actually facing it. Your responsibility is to face up to the failure, talk about it, get some feedback. And when you hear the painful feedback that you don't want to hear, try and learn from that. You may get some really good advice, but sometimes you're not in the psychological state to take that advice.
Who's that French surgeon that said every surgeon walks around with a graveyard?
René Lariche.
Really?
Henry Marsh has it in the beginning of his book. Every surgeon has a graveyard where we bury our skeletons.
Yeah.
And medicine was not particularly transparent. And I think radical truth in surgery is sadly lacking. Little error is not registered. Whereas if a little error was happened in the space program or in flight, you register it because you learn from it. So honesty really helps. The Shinkansen, my really good friend Paul Barash, who's an anesthesiologist from the States, very clever guy, been in patient safety for more than 20 years. He says, the Shinkansen was, I think, last year or 2 years ago, 11 seconds late. The whole network. Compare that to the rest of the Japanese railways. There was a huge difference. Japanese railways were probably like British railways. But you drill down into why they were only 11 seconds late. And they were only 11 seconds late because the culture is about truth. And no one blames you for it. If, let's say, the driver was eating a bag of crisps and they overshoot the platform by a foot, that's important in Japan. So you rewind, and rather than do what they do in Britain, blame the person, give them a fine, send them to some sort of retraining, they'll say, what happened? I was eating because I was hungry. Oh, why were you hungry? This is your... And so go back to the root cause of things and actually help people, empower them to make the system work well. So I think radical truth in surgery is painful. Because why? Because it's your livelihood that rests on it. Let's say you're a surgeon that's doing laparoscopic cholecystectomy, the old-fashioned surgeon, laparoscopic cholecystectomy, as well as some hernias and gallbladders, some colorectal surgery. And then the authorities say, well, actually, you can't do the laparoscopic cholecystectomies because you're a lower GI surgeon. So suddenly you're starting to impact on people's livelihoods. And that, unfortunately, makes an impact on how people approach this really important issue of safety and outcomes. Because there's only one reason you and I are here. It's not for us, it's for the patient. However, we've built a system that's all about us. And the sooner we can put some truth and transparency and change that to a service model. And there are many that would argue against that. They would say, I go to work, I do my job, and I really try and help people. I get that. But the culture in medicine is very much about saving face.
Absolutely. I mean, I can relate as a radiologist. You talk about an anastomotic leak. My heart sinks is when I get a discrepancy alert. And finding out that you made a mistake that had impacted patient care. And again, same, just like you, why did I become a radiologist? Why did I become a doctor? And you're right, we're in a new age of transparency.
How do you feel when you get an error report?
It's a heart sink moment. Yeah. It's a gut wrench, and
it's visceral, isn't it?
It's visceral. It's painful. It's absolutely painful. You forget about the other thousands of lives that you made a difference, positive difference, and you saved. But when that one life that you let that person down, it is, I like the way you say, it's painful. It's absolutely painful. But maybe that's why we became doctors, because we're people who care, we're people who empathize.
But I think the pain, the emotion is about, again, us, which is fair. But actually, if you take the Federer model of dealing with that, you learn from that. And then you have to, your duty to that patient is, I've learned from that error, and I will move on and try and not to avoid that again, and you have to move on. And my feeling is we need to keep as many people on track, even though these errors occur, because all the research suggests that if you have that learning environment, the errors go down, the reliability of the organization, of the individuals improves. Then you have team working. Helen Keller says, why do we work in teams? Where you spread the load. That's really important, because I think medics just have their task load is just really high. So then you impair cognitive function. You catch error because you've got people around there to watch your back. You can actually get a different perspective on dealing with some of the problems. And the fourth really important thing is you can have some fun doing your work. Yeah. And we seem to have lost that team working ethic. I think through the 2000s, there were some significant system-wide issues that were, system-wide changes that were made to try and improve the system because of the pressure. And those have unfortunately acted against us and caused probably more problems. And I'm talking specifically about the breakdown of the medical and surgical teams, the general practice teams, the ability for primary and secondary care to talk to each other and learn from each other.
And I want to, now we talk about transparency and about thriving. Could you remember a time when the chips were down? We both question, why did I become a doctor? Why did I become a surgeon? Why did I become a radiologist? And we've all had those moments where everything just looked bleak. Do you remember a time when you questioned your very choices, and what did you do to get out of it to be where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, the times that I've felt bad they're immeasurable. And I think one of the things, having worked in the NHS for 30 years and having time to reflect on it, is you look at all the problems that you've had and how you were A, armed to deal with it, and B, how you actually dealt with it. So I've had a number of situations clinically where I've had that gut-wrenching, visceral feeling of just wanting the ground to swallow you up. I've had other interpersonal issues. And actually, the clinical issues were really hard. Specifically, anastomotic leaks or a decision I made on a patient. That patient had a really poor outcome. And having to walk in every day and talk to the patient's daughter and to go to ITU, there was a physical sense that I couldn't walk through. You know what the ITU in the hospital we worked in is like. So you have to walk through this corridor. And there were some times where I just physically couldn't move there. And it's really difficult when you're leading a team and you feel so appalling. So when you walk into an intensive care unit, it's amazing. You've got a patient there. You feel all the eyes are on you. Yeah. The person may potentially be there because of you. So that was a really horrible, horrible feeling. But it's the feeling that generations of surgeons have had because we're doing things that are high risk. We've made a call. Some of this is based on all the knowledge we have. And usually it's not a technical issue that has caused the problem. It's usually a failure of decision making, choosing the wrong patient, often delay in making a diagnosis. So it's really tough, that sort of thing. The interpersonal issues, I think, were far more difficult. These were the things that really nearly broke me. The things that made me not sleep. And actually, I feel I'm quite a strong, resilient person. And to have got to a stage where, I couldn't eat. I was sleeping about 3 hours. And then I just kept having these, during the day, having these flashes. Now, I had to ask myself, was I safe to work during this particularly stressful time? And the time lasted about 4 months. And again, I got so depressed that I just wanted to chuck the whole thing in.
Yeah.
But then you start going down a spiral of, how am I going to pay for the mortgage?
Yeah. The basics,
I'm going to let my
family down.
And you do start getting dark thoughts, and perhaps they'd all be better without you here. One particular issue did lead to a really, really difficult, dark time. What I knew was I needed to get some sleep. That was number one. And I was so amazed, as always, for the years that we've been together, nearly 37 years. My wife has been just the most amazing sounding board. She sometimes gives me some solutions when I know she's right, and I'm just so annoyed you want to scream. Just stop, you're right. But she's always there, and she always cares, and she does, when I have bad weekends, for example, with a clinical issue, she'll just make sure the kids are all sorted and just gives me the space. And I think space is really important. But her supporters, just immense. As I alluded to, I've got 2 or 3 amazing friends that I could talk to with no judgment. And do you know what? They listened really, really well. They were there, and they did sort of nice things they were small things that made a big difference. And I've worked with a coach for 6 years now, and he was actually the godsend. And I think there were times when you just had tears in your eyes, and you just think, and he just listened, and he said, if it's a problem with the floor, you can sort it out. It can be fixed. If it's a problem with the roof, it needs an emergency attention now. He taught me to prioritize. He talked to me about fight, flight, or fawn. There's one issue where I was actually going to just walk away from the whole thing, and he said, you absolutely can't walk away from it, because what happens also when you're in a stressful situation is you lose insight. So don't make any big judgments in that time. So you need a good crew.
Yeah.
And I've identified who that crew are. I've learnt how to speak and to behave in those situations. It won't be the last time that some issue happens, but we all have it in all walks of life. I think the clinical one is really tough on any surgeon. And I think what I would say to it doesn't need to be a young surgeon, it's all surgeons. It goes without saying. You have to be brutally honest with yourself. You have to ask for help.
Yeah.
And you have to speak to the patient. If something happens, you have to hold their hand. Optics are so important. So, if there was a problem on the ward, just being there as the consultant just takes away that whole thing of, we never saw the consultant, why my dad was having this conflict. Always pick up the phone and ring up. After an operation, I tend to ring up the patients and have a chat with them, or the relative. So I think these really painful episodes in life will come to you. And there's no amount of, there's no, this is too difficult. I'm going to walk away, or expecting the hospital to protect you, or, that doesn't work. No. However much you have in the system. So you can have time off with stress. That's fine. But what are you going to do with that time? Some people are in such a perturbed state of mental anguish that they must be taken away out of the system. And this is a burnout type issue. It's a very, very famous Australian surgeon, Professor Cox, who did a great talk about burnout, and he described himself, which I thought was very brave. And he had to be taken out of the system. This is somebody who was organising education, doing fantastic operations, head of the unit, and just reboot. I think the most important thing is, if that happens, I don't think that is an event that's beyond redemption that you can't come back from. You can always come back. And I think actually the people who do come back come back so much better. There's this really important thing: come back better, not bitter.
Absolutely.
That's so crucial.
I mean, I can relate to you. I mean, I had an issue several years ago. I may have mentioned it. Same thing, 3 to 4 months. There's a theme here, isn't it? And I too was in a very dark space myself. And then suddenly you said the basics: how do you pay your mortgage? And then you suddenly feel like you're a failure to your children, you're a failure to your spouse, and then you're the failure, and you've let everyone down. But then you talked about your wife and how she has been this really powerful pillar for you. How important is family? I mean, in terms of, we talked about the journey and the family supporting you. And the one thing I learned is speak to family as early as possible, speak to your friends. And the other thing I've realized is we're not the only ones. After my experience, I've realized other clinicians, other healthcare leaders have actually gone through the same problem. It's a similar theme, but it ultimately comes down to some of the stuff you said: family, friends, and colleagues. And what would be the lesson that we could share with a young surgeon out there, a young clinician who's looking at someone like you? You've achieved everything. Now they've realized actually we're imperfect ourselves.
So that's really hits a nail on the head. The key things are: have your crew, and your family must be a really, really important part of that. Number 2 is, your mind can go racing away. So what I do is I put myself in a bad place. I think if this happens, this will happen, and it won't. The closest crocodile to the boat is actually you. So you've got to put some perspective on what's going on. And I think you mentioned how important is the family. The reality is, whatever you do, whether you're trying to win Olympic medals, playing in the Premier League, or doing your job, whatever your job may be, the most important thing is your life and the people you're with. Your job is important. It's super important. But there's nothing more important than actually the people you're with and why you go to work. So it's important for people to realize that's your succor, that's the bosom that will protect you. And at the end of it all, what are you going to say on your deathbed? I certainly don't want to say, I was a really good surgeon. Some people may argue with that, but I think it's how you want to be as a human being. You've got to get your perspectives right on what's important in life. And stuff happens.
And we get constantly asked now, do you want your children to be doctors? With all these changes taking place. It's all in the news. Doctors going on strike, AI, technology. Is there still hope to that young medical student out there? Is there still hope for them?
There's always hope. It's the best job possible. But do you know what? We've got to stop pigeonholing a certain social strata with doing, certainly in Eastern culture, it was, doctor, lawyer, or teacher for social status, etc. The whole nature of what we do in terms of diagnostics, delivery of medicine is going to be radically changed. We are going to have different roles deployed to do some of the jobs. So the doctoring that you and I went into, it will change. It will naturally change. So I still think the patient interaction, that interface with people, is what I love. And I think medicine is great for that. It's super, super stressful. You're making Formula One decisions constantly. Your brain is ticking over constantly. So you have to have clarity and you have to have dedication. And you've got to really, really, really love it. So if your kid doesn't like it, there's no harm in doing any other jobs. And I don't want to mention jobs as if they're, demean them, but there are some really exciting opportunities out there. So
Absolutely.
To a young person, I'd say if you love medicine and love interacting with people, that's great. The laboratory stuff is really fantastic. the opportunities with getting expertise and helping develop this whole AI co-piloting infrastructure, and also some of the autonomy that's going to come in, is so exciting. So if you want to get into that space, that's great. What are we going to do about building colonies when we go to outside the Earth? What are we going to do with some of the issues that we'll face with climate change? Mm-hmm. Those jobs will be, super. Yeah. And, I've just had a really privileged time being a surgeon, and I have no doubt that the scars that I've had have ultimately made me. There's a lot more to come, but it's also shaped me to be much more empathetic, to give much more time, also to love myself a little bit more and give myself a bit more time. And I think you really got to reflect. Otherwise, your 40s and 50s can be a really tough time in the jobs that we do.
I'll find that out. But I like how you said, we have to find time to love ourselves, and you've got to have your crew around you, and it's okay. And I think that's what I tell a lot of future doctors. It's okay to make mistakes, of course. Own up to it, learn from it. And I've realized that we're not alone as doctors or surgeons. Tan, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed this chat with you.
Cheers, Ram. It's great to be with you.
Thank you very much, Tan.